Welcome, Yadobun, to another episode of the Gifted Present podcast, where you'll be unpacking life with your host, Jess, your newest lifestyle blogger, and myself, your internet friend and hype gal. Hey, Jess. We're back for another episode. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty all right. It's good to see you. Always love talking with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's sunshine in Portland, so no rain, so I'm feeling good about that. Before we jump into our topic today, I wanted to give us a friendly little reminder that every episode we will be ending with featuring a small business that is owned by a person of color. Why are we doing this? Well, one, we're not sponsored, but two, we are doing this because we care about our communities and this is our way of showing support. So a little preview on who we will be featuring today. We will be talking about Nerd Square. It's a clothing brand, so stay tuned, please. So Jess, what will we be unpacking today?
Yeah, so if you've been following us on our podcast journey, you'll know that we've been celebrating AAPI Heritage Month for the month of May. But also, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I just think that that is so appropriate because I think that many Asians have a complicated or even non-existent relationship with mental health awareness. Some people in our community may see mental health issues like depression and anxiety as a thing of weakness or a myth, or it could be a problem that you can make go away by yourself. However, all of the craziness that's been happening in this new decade so far has taken a serious toll on a lot of people's mental health. So I just wanted to list a couple statistics to show how serious this issue is. So according to a Mental Health America's 2020 report, the number of people looking for help with anxiety and depression has skyrocketed. From January to September 2020, there was a 93% increase over the 2019 total number of anxiety screens and a 62% increase over the 2019 total number of depression screens. Rates of people experiencing moderate to severe depression and anxiety has continued to increase throughout 2020, and it remains higher than rates prior to COVID-19. There are also rates of suicidal ideation that are higher, and this is highest among youth, especially in the LGBTQ youth community. In September 2020, over half of 11 to 17-year-olds have reported to have thoughts of suicide or self-harm more than half or nearly every day of the previous 2 weeks. And when it comes to the context of the AAPI community, people are searching for mental health services way more than ever in 2020. And that's really what I want to focus on here today, because the rise in Asian hate crimes is absolutely horrific and disgusting, especially when these attacks are happening to vulnerable targets. So many people have come out saying that they no longer feel safe stepping outside of their homes. And then the Atlanta shooting happened where Asian spas were targeted. And then shortly afterwards, a shooting in Indianapolis occurred where the targeted facility was known for being heavily populated by chic employees. So we've had so many tragedies come to light in the past year, but as we've discussed in our Asian American history episode, the issues that we see now, they're not new at all. They're actually trends that have been around for centuries, and so no one should be surprised by these events. We're seeing in real time history repeating itself over and over again. So with all of this in mind, we wanted to spend this episode talking about how racism specifically affects mental health, especially in the Asian community context, by sharing our own personal stories. But before we dive into that, I do want to say that when Sehlynn and I were planning our AAPI Heritage episodes, we knew that we wanted to talk about racism, but it was really difficult trying to decide what things to talk about. And I think personally for me, it's because I've been silenced about the topic for so long, and when it comes to racism against Asians in America, it's not only the white majority who have silenced us, but we've also been silenced by other minority groups, and this includes our own community. Like, how many of us have received some sort of message along the lines of, we don't have it as bad as other minority groups, and that we should just keep our heads down and prove our haters wrong by working hard and succeeding. So when it comes to the issue of racism and the Asian community, I think before we even try to rally, protest, or mobilize, which are all things that I totally support, I think a lot of us in our community haven't even had a chance to speak out and know that their stories and experiences experiences matter. It's so foreign for us to be heard. So I feel like even if we were given a platform, I know that at least for myself, I wouldn't even know how to use it in the first place because I'm still processing things.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. I think it is really important for us to talk about this. And one thing that we really want to also note is that we're not here to solve the issue of racism. We don't have all the answers. And if it was that simple, it would have been eradicated by now. But we just want to have an open and honest discussion about racism and the effects that it can have on real people. When we share our stories, we're not here to cast blame on anybody or single out any group. We're here to just really have that open and honest discussion because we believe that if we talk about these things, we can work together. And honestly, blame only divides. So we hope that you will listen to our conversation and that it would help you to even open up conversation with your own families and with your friends. And if you have any feedback or if you want to share your story, please let us know because this really hurts.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that bit. And I'm so thankful that that's something that you wanted to just set up our episode with. And I just wanted to say that I had such a hard time with even just grappling with what racism is. It's such a hot button issue, but I actually had a hard time finding a unifying definition of what the word even means. So I started out with a dictionary, and the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines racism as the belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. But it's interesting because I found a good number of articles that critiqued this definition, saying that it isn't enough. And a lot of articles went further to specifically point out white people and say something along the lines that racism is a belief and establishment of laws that specifically benefit white people and perpetuate white privilege. And it's interesting because a lot of these articles were written by Americans or American organizations. So I branched out and found that different parts of the global community had different definitions of racism. For example, in countries where white people are not the majority, there's still racism. There's a majority group of people who oppress the minority group. But interestingly, in a lot of these cases, the group that held more favor or power were those with lighter skin tone. And so that opens up the debate as to why this is the way that it is. Is it because of colonialism, where white-skinned Europeans became a symbol of power? Or is it classism, where wealthy people didn't have to labor in the sun while poorer people did, and as a result had tanned and darker skin? So I still don't really know how to define racism, but one certain thing that I did find in my search for a definition is that racism is a very emotionally charged word, and it can mean different things to different people. So along with the literal definition of the word, it's also so important to understand how the word makes different people feel. And I think that's something really important to acknowledge, because when you approach a conversation about racism, this helps to empathize and understand where the other person is coming from. The word racism is going to have a different effect on each person. Like, I can imagine that for some people, when they hear that word, they can feel anger or hurt, while others may notice that they have some sort of defensiveness starting to rise up within them. So with that in mind, I wanted us to just pause for a second here and hear the word racism and listen to what it makes us feel. So Sehlynn, when you hear this word, what comes to mind or to heart for you?
Yeah, when I hear the word racism, I feel immediate anger, and then it follows with feeling really lonely. And I believe the anger stems from just having to have gone through my own experiences of racism. But I feel really lonely because I want to talk about it more, and when I do, I just don't feel like anyone can really relate or understand where I'm coming from, because they don't feel like I have the right to say anything.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of stems back from like what we talked about last episode about the model minority. And honestly, I just don't feel like people really care to hear Asians talk about their own experiences, because we don't have it as bad, like you said earlier. I know that's so terrible to say.
Yeah.
But that feeling of loneliness comes from that experience of being told to just be quiet because it's not my time. or it's not as bad. And, you know, one thing that was said to me before even was that, well, at least your people aren't dying. And the irony of everything is that with all of these recent cases, it's like, okay, well, you can't say that anymore to me because it is affecting my people in a very physical way too.
Yeah.
And it's not like it hasn't affected us physically before. It's just, I don't think it was recorded the way that things are being recorded now. And I know personally for me, like, you know, with my own family, when it comes to like physical attacks and things like that, they don't report it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel pretty similarly to the things that you've listed, and I'm really starting to see how much the model minority myth has really separated all of us and divided all of us, because it's just like just remember this past week, I was watching footage of another attack on an Asian man, and he was just minding his business. This was happening in broad daylight. He had a 1-year-old baby, and he was walking his baby in his stroller, and a person of color just comes charging towards him, starts repeatedly beating him on his back. He loses control of his stroller. The stroller rolls out of the surveillance camera's view. I don't know what happened to it. Luckily, the baby was safe afterwards, but just constantly just beating this man up in broad daylight. And it was so frustrating. And I think on top of the loneliness, I feel so much hopelessness when I hear that word, because it wasn't labeled as a racial hate crime. They were like, oh, it wasn't racially motivated. And I was like, how can you say that?
It's unbelievable. Because we talked about stereotypes last week too. And I feel like sometimes the stereotypes fuels the racism even more.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's good stereotypes, right? That we're hardworking and we're resilient.
Yeah.
And we fall into this minority model. Part of me is like, do these stereotypes also play in a role, or do these stereotypes help these attackers feel even more empowered to do it because they're not going to really get any consequences?
And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because what I actually wanted to talk about is how racism has a strong psychological impact on Asian Americans. And, obviously more Asians are suffering from anxiety and depression because of all of this. But in terms of like specifically for Asian Americans, that model minority myth is proven to just have such a negative impact on our self-worth, on our mental health. And it's because like we have this quote unquote positive stereotype of being hardworking and compliant. And so if you don't uphold these standards, then it's okay to blame you because you're not doing your job. And that's exactly what people are doing with the coronavirus on Asians. It's just that, like, it's okay to attack you because you're not fitting into the expectations that we've placed on you. Yeah. So that's definitely one thing that is affecting the Asian American community in terms of mental health issues, is that we have this ridiculously high standard compared to even I would say compared to the white community. Our standards are even higher.
Yeah.
And so, like, when we can't meet those standards, then it's always our fault, and therefore we are deserving of blame, which is such a lie. And I also want to say that because of that, racism also affects our sense of self-worth and confidence because we can't meet those high standards. And then racial incidents also make people become more hypervigilant and under constant stress. And as we've talked about before in our previous episode, immigrant families are already under chronic stress. So this is just adding even more onto us. When we become hypervigilant, a lot of times we become also very avoidant. And so, for example, like, I remember when I was involved in a racial incident, it happened on this specific street. I avoid going on that street now. I can't bring myself to go there because I feel very unsafe now, Yeah. And so when you do this, you become avoidant, but then you're also adding to the perpetuating prejudices that you have, because now I'm becoming overly cautious and resentful because I need to protect myself, and now I'm just generalizing the situation. So it's like, not only is that person becoming more racist, or they are just being reinforced with their prejudices, but now me too, I have my own prejudices that I have to work through because of the hurt that I've been through.
Yeah. I feel and agree with everything that you said. I think this is just a really hard topic to unpack because, honestly, personally for me, I'm still processing a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think just feeling like I wasn't allowed to even feel like I experienced my own type of racism really made me question if I ever even really did.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, did that happen to me? But when you really think about it and you hear all of these stories, it starts to really put things into perspective, and you step away and you see the bigger picture, and you're just mind blown. At least for me, I am.
Yeah. I think so many times you try to just not make it as bad as it seems in order to cope with it. You know?
And I think that when you talk about like how there's expectations from us because of the model minority myth, like, and how Asians, we have our own standards. Yeah. Like that constant struggle of like keeping up with that. I know for me, it affects my mental health in a very big way because it just devalues my self-worth. Yeah. And I just feel like I'm never good enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. So those are definitely some things, again, like the way that racism can affect your self-worth, your confidence, your sense of belonging, you know, and even your own sanity, because you can totally be gaslighted into thinking that you haven't been like the victim of a racial hate crime or incident. And so those are all just things that really affect our mental health. And it's in a population that already doesn't even have the proper resources to address our needs in the first place. Right. So I'm really glad that we are talking about these things. And since we're talking about our personal experiences, I did want to ask you, I was wondering if you could share, you know, how old were you when you first experienced racism that you can remember?
Mine goes back to the 6th grade after Spanish class, and there's a small group of girls I just didn't get along with. And I don't even remember what we were talking about or what we were arguing about, but she just ching chong sayed me. She said, ching chong say. And I'm like, I'm not even speaking in Korean. Like, I'm speaking in our language. And that was like one of the first times I was like, I can't believe I just been ching-chonged at. Yeah. But yeah, that was like the first time. How about you?
Yeah, for me, I distinctly remember I was either in 2nd or 3rd grade. I think it was 2nd grade, but it was during recess. And unlike you, it was my friends that did it to me. So a couple of my friends and I were playing, and I don't even remember how it led up to this. Yeah. But we were just having a good time on the blacktop playing some Foursquare, right? And then all of a sudden, the next thing I know is my friends are circling around me, and they have their fingers pulling their eyelids back. And they're like just dancing around and saying ching chong to me. And I was just so shocked because these are my friends. Yeah. And I just did not know what to do. And I don't even remember if I started crying in front of them, but I remember like trying my best to not let it bother me. But then on the way back home on the bus, I remember I cried until I got home. And so again, it's like, it's not like these kids were bullies. And I think it would have been better if they were bullies, but instead they were my friends that I played with at school every day. So I just felt so betrayed and confused. And even if it may seem like an insignificant act that was done by a bunch of little kids who didn't know any better, like this completely like destroyed my confidence. And it's something that definitely triggered and affected my body image of myself. And so, you know, when someone tells you something and it makes a strong impact on you, all of a sudden, like, this is like where your narrative shifts and you can only see things from that lens. Like, that's exactly what happened to me, because suddenly all I could focus on when it came to body image was my eyes. And I just became hypersensitive of what other people portrayed my eyes to be like. And so I know that, like, other people probably don't care, but in my memories now, like what I've stored in my memory bank are all the times that people said something about my eyes to validate what those kids were doing to me. You know, this thing happened to me over 20 years ago, but it still has an effect on my life. And maybe it sounds petty to some people, but to me, it's just like, that's just the reality of how it is. It's like the smallest thing can really just affect the whole narrative of your life. So I don't know if, like, that experience in the 6th grade for you, if that has, like, significantly impacted your mental health, but I'm very curious to hear from you, like, how has racism affected your mental health specifically?
That specific memory did bother me, but I don't think it has as much of an effect on me as this other story. When I was 19, I had a paper that was due for an English class, and the only library that had the book I needed to write the paper on was the Harold Washington Library. And I remember, like, I forgot an idea or something, but I was just so desperate to borrow this book because I procrastinated. I didn't have a lot of time, and shipping was going to take too long to, like, order the book. And I was honestly trying to save money too. So
nice. All good things.
But I ended up just trying to, like, plead with the librarian that was there. And she was an older white woman. She was like an elderly white woman. And I will never forget what she said to me. She said, "Sweetheart, just because you have a green card doesn't mean that you can get everything you want."
Stop.
And what I'm mad about the most is that I did not speak up for myself, because I was so baffled. I was so shocked that she had said that. And I was in disbelief that she even brought the word green card into the sentence. I just turned away and I walked silently and I went home. And it wasn't until I shared the story and people that were older was like, "That's racist. You should write a letter to the library," and blah, 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 blah. Like, that was the first time I was like, oh my God. Do people really think I'm not born here? Because I'm very proud to have been born in Chicago. And it just made me feel like I'm never going to be good enough for this country. That's such a dramatic thing to say, right? Just from that one encounterance, but it really did take a toll. And I mean, and then it was like, you know, I worked at a restaurant too, and God, on our uniform, I don't know why our boss wanted this, but we had a uniform and our names were monogrammed on it, right? And under your name, we were told to give a city that we want put under our name. So I initially said, "Hey, I want to have Chicago, Illinois on," because I didn't know I'm from Chicago, right? I'm proud to be from Chicago. And then my manager was like, "Oh, that's boring. Can you put something else?" I was like, "Okay, well, I'm from Korea. Well, I'm Korean. I'm not from Korea, but I am, you know." So I asked, "Can you put Seoul, Korea?" That was the biggest mistake of my life, because I constantly was asked by people that I served, "Oh, how long have you been here?" And, you know, at first it was like, so offended, right? So I'll be like, "All my life, I was born here." And then, you know, I just started like, eventually I got so numb to being asked that, I just made it a joke. And I was like, "I've only been here for 2 years." And they're like, "Oh my God, how do you speak English so well?" I'm like, "Well, I watched a lot of American TV in Korea." Go America. Go America. Yeah, and they're like, "Honey, can you listen to her speak? It's incredible." I mean, the tip was higher. Thank you. But it made me feel like, okay, so I have to devalue myself and I have to lower myself in order for these people to accept me. And even from that experience with the restaurant, I realized that mentality carried me into like every professional role I ended up in.
I'm so sorry that that's what you went through, because that's so inappropriate. Because first of all, Chicago's an amazing, fun city.
It is.
Like, it's probably like the last way to describe Chicago would be boring.
Yeah.
So we should be proud that we were born and raised here. But second of all, like, that's just so, it's so frustrating for me to hear that, because I know you're such a capable person, and that, like, it just goes to show that words cut so deep. And I'm sure outside of racism, anyone can say that they've had a significant person or a significant event happen where they were told something verbally and it has greatly impacted or even changed the course of their life direction. You know, so it's not about, again, like who's had it worse, but it's just the fact that, like, these life experiences happen to you and you have to validate them. No matter how micro that microaggression is, like, if it made you feel a certain way, that's okay, you know? Yeah. And sometimes you can even say, like, yeah, maybe I was being too sensitive and maybe I was, but at least allow yourself to first just express that emotion in a healthy way, because like, so many bad things happen because people just keep suppressing what they feel. Like, it's okay to feel. And I just think that it's so important for us to understand that suppressing your emotions, it's not emotional maturity. Yeah. It's emotional immaturity. Yeah. What emotional maturity is being able to feel all of those intense emotions and to be able to handle it. Yeah. You know, that's how you grow emotionally. But to ignore it and just be like, oh, it was like a microaggression, like, that doesn't help you grow as a person. So yeah, girl, if you're angry, you feel that. It's okay to feel angry. Anger is not a bad thing, you know?
Oh, trust me, I feel a lot of anger. I've expressed it too, but I've just been told, like, hey, like, get over it. Yeah. A lot from my own peers too, that are Asian. Yeah. Like, oh, it's not that bad. Whatever. It's just, people are always going to be like that. But it's like, well, if we don't talk about it, if we don't tell people how we're really feeling, how is there ever going to be change? Right. I just feel like our people and our communities are just somewhat divided because we're constantly saying, no, I had it worse. Our history's worse. I mean, honestly, at this point, it's not even about that. Yeah. You know? Can we just accept that all of us are hurting? Yeah. It's not about who's hurting more. It's just the fact that we're hurting. All of our ancestors sucked. Yeah. Yeah. They all messed up. But are we going to repeat what they had done? Or are we going to be better than them and go from here, take what we know, and try to build a better world? Right. And I think I really want to just sit on that topic for a second, because I cringe a lot when people who are white, they come up to me with their white guilt and they say, like, something along the lines of, like, I'm so sorry about my white privilege. I'm aware of it now. And I remember I was talking about this with my therapist once, and she brought up such a good illustration where when someone does that, it's like the equivalent of a really rich and wealthy person dressed up in all their designer clothes, going up to a really poor person in their second or third hand-me-downs, right? And being like, I'm so sorry that I'm so rich. You know, that I have all of this and you don't. Wow. I feel like that is what white guilt is. Like, that like just hits so close to home for me. Wow. And so I cringe when a lot of times people are very well-meaning. You know, I appreciate that you want to grow as a person, but when it comes to, like, you know, being aware of your white guilt, like, that's not the way to express it. Yeah. You know? And I honestly don't have the correct answer as to how, you know, to express that. But I know for sure that way to do it is not helpful at all. You know? And I bring that up, though, because I think a lot of white people, they get a lot of crap, you know,
for perpetuating racism and whatever. But I think it's so important that in any discussion or any argument or any sort of dialogue, like, you have to also point the finger back to yourself and be like, what am I racist about as a minority? I'm capable of this too, because I am equally human as this white person.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so like, what are my prejudices? And so when I was thinking about this question, what I thought of is like how I grew up with parents who witnessed the 1992 LA riots. And I know that this event left a very deep wound and divide between the African American and Korean community. And it also left a lot of Koreans feeling hopeless and helpless and abandoned by public authorities. And I just can't help but think that this really terrified my parents who witnessed this, because they only moved to the U.S. a couple years prior to that. And so now they're seeing this in the news, and they've also been working in small shops and businesses. And so they had a fear of Black people for a really long time. I'm just going to be completely honest. And then that transferred over to me. And so for a long time, like, when I saw a Black person, there was a part of me that was very afraid for no reason. And it wasn't until someone called me out on that when I was in college, and they were like, that is racist, Jessica, that I had to reflect and be like, wow, I am really capable of having my own prejudices too. So before I point the finger at other people and being like, hey, you're racist, I have to look at myself and be like, okay, how am I racist? And when we fast forward again, like, when I think about like Trump and when he became president, like, he had his fair share of saying very openly racist remarks, you know, and it's kind of redeeming, because it was bad to listen to all of that, but it also made my parents wake up and realize that, hey, I am actually a racist too in these contexts. And especially after the events of George Floyd happening, my parents became a lot more introspective, and they started to realize their own prejudices against the Black community and being like, hey, I shouldn't think these things about them, or I shouldn't make this overgeneralized statement about them. And I've actually had like really, really good conversations with my mom about racism because of this. And so no matter how old or how young you are, like, you're always going to have those prejudices that you have to be aware of. And you also have to realize that you are very well as capable of being a racist, because let's just be real, every minority group has a derogatory term or slang to describe a white person. Every language has it.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think, you know, who you're around and who you surround yourself with will influence you. And, you know, I can definitely share a story. I mean, so someone had told me that someone that they know, their daughter had gotten married to an Indian man. And the comments around that were, isn't that weird? That's just so weird. The cultures are so different. And, you know, just Jessica, you know who I grew up around and stuff, you know, like, what was said about Indian culture wasn't nice. Why I'm sharing this is because I was at a McDonald's, and just for small talk, like, I don't know why, but I brought up the story that was shared with me about someone's daughter getting married to an Indian man. And without even thinking, I was like, isn't that weird? And one of my friends literally said, that's so racist. And I got so defensive, because I don't consider myself to be a racist person.
Yeah.
But then, like, I really thought about it. And, you know, I ended up, like, writing this whole, like, novel text apologizing and, like, explaining, like, that it wasn't my intentions to be this way. And just really understanding, like, I totally understand where you're coming from. But, you know, like, I really reflect on it even now. And I'm like, wow, you know, I had developed some prejudices because I... you know, listen to other people's opinion, and because I value those people's opinion, I just let their opinions become my own, and that's wrong itself. So it really challenged me to, like, really start thinking about what I do want to agree with and what I don't want to agree with. And also made me realize, like, I have some things to work on too, because I'm not perfect.
Right.
I mean, I feel like Asian people are racist against Asian people sometimes.
Totally.
When you say, you know how you share that story about, like, your friends telling you that you have small eyes. I've always been told I had small eyes, not necessarily from white people, but from a lot of Asian people.
Oh, same.
They're like, why are your eyes so small? I'm like, your eyes are so small. Always commenting on the size of my eyes. And it's like, I'm sorry they're not the size of a golf ball. But yes, I can still see, if you're wondering.
Yeah. And not in widescreen.
Yeah. It's in full screen too. 4K.
HD 2020, baby.
But I think this is like why this is such a hard topic to talk about too, because it's like, at least for me, I feel like I internalized a lot of things. And now as an adult, because of all of these things happening, I'm allowed to really think about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to point out, I love that you were able to recognize that defensiveness that you felt when someone called you out on being a racist.
Yeah.
Because I think defensiveness is such a red flag that there's something up. If someone says something about you and you feel defensive and the guards go up, like you better explore that and see where that defensiveness is coming from. Like there's a reason you're feeling that way. I mean, we could have like a whole episode on like cancel culture and whatever. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want us to get canceled in any way.
Right.
But
don't cancel us. Please.
We just started. But it's just like, can you let people make mistakes, please?
Yeah.
You know, can you let people grow? You know, and it's like, yes, like keep people accountable, but keep them accountable for their growth, not like this isolated incident that they did when they were like a teenager. Because again, kids are stupid. Adults are stupid. Your 20s is just a decade of stupid, okay?
Yeah.
Let us live our lives so that we don't have to feel defensive when people call us out on something. Because it's just like, okay, call me out. Let me just take a step back and really invite myself to reflect and examine and be like, was I really racist in that situation? Yeah. And if I was, I'm sorry, because that's not the type of person that I want to be. And let me learn and grow from this.
Yes. Definitely. You know, here's another TV reference. Do you know Modern Family?
I love Modern Family, yeah.
One thing I love about that show is, like, especially in the first, like, few seasons, you know, when Cam and Mitchell adopt Lily. Like, there's so many times they act racist and they call themselves out. They're like, oh my God, why did I just say that? Oh my God, I'm so bad.
Yeah.
But it's like I mean, I guess my point is like you said, it's about acknowledging it and then learning and growing from it. I think we also have to give people a chance to grow too, not ourselves, not only ourselves, but we have to give people a chance to grow and stop condemning them for making a mistake or not getting it right away. I mean, everyone, it's a learning process.
For sure.
Are you going to like yell at like a 5-year-old for not understanding how to ride a bike right away? Like if it's completely new to him?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to like defend like racism or anything like that.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah.
I'm just saying that sometimes maybe we don't give enough time, or we have this high expectation for just people to immediately understand our story.
Yeah.
Because I have shared traumatic experiences that doesn't even evolve around racism.
Yeah.
And I don't always get the response that I want. And I realize I can't expect people to just understand the trauma that I experienced.
And that's what I think it is that it takes time, you know, and that's why I think we got to get on this right now, because it's going to take time for people to, first of all, process even their life experiences and be like, was it racism? Was it not? And then after that, they have to write their story and share their narrative. And that takes a lot of courage to do that. So since it's going to take a lot of time, we got to start now. I guess like I just wanted to wrap up this episode talking a little bit about how to deal with racial trauma. Because for the time being, you know, again, because we don't live in a perfect world without racism, and it's going to take a lot of hard work that goes maybe even beyond our lifetime to fix. So it's going to keep happening. And so in the meantime, I think it's important to know that we're not powerless and that there are healthy ways of coping through racial trauma. And some of these coping skills or mechanisms include practicing self-care, getting involved in activism, receiving therapy, or even talking about and sharing your experiences with others, like how we did today. So to close, Hetty, one question that I do want to ask you is, what are some coping strategies that you've used that worked for you? Or is there anything on the list of things that I've mentioned that you think would help you in terms of working through any racial trauma?
How I work and cope with this is by talking about it. Because I've internalized it for so long.
Yeah.
That one, I want to share my story because I want others to understand the pain, not just for myself, but for other people.
Yeah.
And I also want things that are happening just to stop, like all the violence. But talking about it and sharing my stories and actually having those conversations has honestly also been very healing. Because sure, there's times where I might have shared a story and the person that is listening doesn't even want to really listen.
Yeah.
But there are also times where I do share the story and the person is listening.
Yeah.
And they do want to do something about it too.
Yeah. You know, again, the purpose of this episode was just to initiate honest conversations. Like, this is just a start, you know, and it's an invitation to just leave any sort of judgment or condemnation at the door. And maybe for some of you, you listen to this episode and you're not satisfied because you're just like, oh, this is so basic. You know, I got nothing out of this. But I also know that, at least in even my own personal circle of friends, like we haven't even shared stories about racism. You know, this is a big step for a lot of people. And I want to make sure that all of us do take that baby step and those bigger steps into bringing certain issues into light, because it's really hard to talk about hurtful experiences and to relive past memories that we don't want to, but it's also very important to work out these things. So I would say that in terms of for this week, some things to reflect on would be, what do you feel when you hear the word racism? And what are some memories that come to mind that contribute to these feelings? And then can you also be honest with yourself and look and see what sort of prejudices that you might be holding on to? And I think that would just be a great start. And who knows, you know, further down the road, we can have even deeper conversations on specific topics or things like that. But just for today, I think a lot of us just need to have the door open and take that first step. And that's all we wanted to accomplish for today.
Yeah. Leave the door open. Totally sets. I'm glad I sing it wrong so we don't get copyrighted. I was trying to reference to Bruno Mars.
Nice.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I know it wasn't the lightest topic ever, but we really do appreciate you guys listening. We also purposely didn't go into too much detail about what we wanted to do addressing racism and other topics on activism, because we're actually saving that for our last AAPI episode. So please stay tuned for next week. And if you guys have any organizations that you want to recommend for us to highlight in our next episode, please share that with us. You can DM us, you can comment on our posts. We'll definitely be looking out for those. And as promised, we wanted to feature a small business owned by a person of color. So today, we're going to be highlighting Nerd Square, and that's square with an S and a Q. Nerd Square is actually run by someone that calls him the Hoodie Man on TikTok. I'll put his handle right here. And if you follow the Hoodie Man's TikTok page, then you will get updates on restock items and other items that are going to be new to his clothing brand line. And if you're wondering what kind of clothes he sells, it's hoodies and things that are more street. We'll put some pictures right here. And thank you, Jehu Islas. If I said your name wrong, I'm so sorry. But thank you so much for recommending Nerd Square. I also know that you're one of our faithful listeners, and I really appreciate all your comments. We appreciate your support, so thank you so much. We wanted to give you a quick shout out. And Thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Again, if you're wondering about anything we talked about, our show notes are down below. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow. We are on YouTube. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Spotify. We're now on Apple Podcasts. Yes, we are.
Woo!
At The Gifted Present. So thank you guys so much for your support and love. We love you guys. So until next time, see ya, love ya, and ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao, 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 ciao.